best attendance we ever had at one of these meetings, and it looks like we broke last year's record. Thank you. But Tom Hutson is our local surfing historian. Okay, he's also he produces products, hats, and stickers and other things under the label of Big Yellow Dot. So ask him about that. Okay. But Tom has been a resident here in Gulf Breeze since 1961. He's been a surfer since 1970. Now, that surprised me because he told me he was 39 years old. Anyway, I'm delighted to have Tom back, and he's got 3 other speakers lined up next to him, so I'll let him do the introductions.
Just so you guys know that are standing, there's some empty seats up here. It says reserved, but it's open for anyone that would like to sit down instead of stand. So there's the first 2 rows. There's a number of seats, so please come on up.
Lisa, come on up.
Okay, everyone, thanks so much for coming. As Jim said, last year, the Gulf Breeze Historical Society invited me to come speak about surfing, and I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. And I thought maybe 10 or 15 people would show up, and we had a lot of people that showed up, which told me there's a huge interest in local surfing. And so they asked me again to come, and I thought, okay, I would love to. I'm not sure what I would say, and I started thinking, I've talked to Brian Waters, who has some great stories, and Brian Waters owned Islander Surfboards back in the 70s and 80s and into the 80s. And then, so I thought, well, maybe I could ask him a couple questions. And then I thought, well, I contacted Mike Bredesen, who was kind of his right-hand guy and worked with him for years. And so Mike said, sure, I'll come. And then I talked to Dave Skelton, who I'll tell you about in a second. And he said, well, if they're going to come, I'll come. So I thought, well, then this could be a really fun event. It won't just be me, it'll be these guys. And so this is called, in my mind, Surf History Part 2, the Islander / Bucks Surf Shop years. So I don't want to sound corny. It's kind of hard to overstate the impact that these guys have had on local surfing. Now, some of you may or may not believe in trickle-down economics, but I think about trickle-down culture. And so in our little surfing world here, the stuff that happened back in the 70s and 80s has kind of trickled down to, and it's impacted the kids, the adults that are surfing now. So it makes our culture different than all the other beach towns. So we have our own unique surf culture. And Brian Waters, well, we're going to be talking about him and with him tonight, and so you'll understand more clearly in a few minutes. But he had Islander Surfboards, as I said, which came out of Hutson Surf Shop, Hutson Hardware. My last name is Hutson, and we'll go into that in a second. Mike has worked with him for years. He's traveled around quite a bit and brought his own ideas back to the local surfing world, and they would bring new design ideas which impacted the surfers. Now, then there's Dave Skelton, who's right here next to me, and he's going to hate this, but it's hard to overstate his impact on our surf community. And the reason I say that is for, well, 2 reasons. One Am I echoing or is it just me? Okay. So Dave was willing to buy all this photographic equipment and probably made pennies on the dollar ultimately, I'd say. But he was willing to go out on the best days of the year, mainly back in the 70s, and take pictures of our best days. He would swim out in the lineup with his water camera. But not only did he do that, but he also, because we had some other photographers, a few others prior to Dave, but Dave made connections with the surf magazines. And so he started getting pictures in the surf magazines of some really good subjects that we had here, like Yancey Spencer and Beezer Turner, and I know Brian was in a picture, Mike's been in a picture, Ted Cobia, and some different guys, Dirk Wood. I know I'm missing some, but
Falbo.
Okay, JB Falbo, Mark Fu. Yes, that's a great one.
Russo.
What's that?
Russo.
I don't think John was in the magazines. I don't think.
Okay.
But anyway, so and then Dave, on top of that, he also had Buck's Surf Shop, and we'll kind of go into how that all came about here as the night progresses. But Dave at one time had what, like 4 stores? I mean, you had Warrenton.
We had 4 stores, but I think only 3 had opened at any one time.
Okay, only 3 at one time. Okay. So I know he had a shop in Fort Walton Beach for a while. He had Pensacola Beach, Gulf Breeze, Navy Boulevard. Okay, all right. So anyway, that gives you an idea. Okay, now what we're going to do right now, we're going to bounce around a little bit, but we're going to zigzag and we're going to go before these guys. And what I want you to do is just imagine, put on your 1971, 1972 hat and imagine being at the National Guard Armory on Gregory Street, which was nowhere near as nice as this. There was no carpet. I don't think there's any heat in the air that I remember. The acoustics were terrible, but we didn't care. And you have to think in 1971 and 1972, there was no internet. There was no, the only surf media besides, if we were lucky, a surf movie came to town maybe once a year. And then the surf magazines came out, Surfer and Surfing, but they came out once every 2 months. Henry, there's seats up here, grab some.
Oh, yeah, take these up. Oh, no,
So, it was a really big deal to come to a surf movie in Pensacola because that was it. You know, you couldn't just go to Instagram and see pictures every hour. And so a guy came to town named Hal Jepson, and he brought a movie that's called The Cosmic Children. And The Cosmic Children at the time was a pretty big deal, and it came here, so I was like, whoa. But if you look at it now, I imagine you can find it on YouTube, you'll look at it and you'll be really disappointed because the surfing is so slow compared to now. But when he came with his camera, and it just turned out that we had an offshore day, a cold front came through, we had really good surf. And he went to a place called The Last House. Does anyone know where The Last House is or was? Some of the guys. The Last House at that time was the easternmost house down towards what we now call Portofino, the last house on Areola Drive. And it was a good surf spot back then. Well, he came and filmed it. And he filmed Kevin Wood, who's here, somewhere who's here. And he filmed, okay, he's hiding his head. So Kevin Wood, a guy named Glenn Curl, Beezer Turner, and then there's a guy named Jay Riddle. And Jay Riddle is from California. I know I'm talking too much. I'm going to show this in just a second, I promise. But Jay Riddle had been on the cover of Surfer magazine, and I think it was just before that. It could have been just after, but okay. Well, Jay Riddle, in my little world, to be on the cover of Surfer magazine, you might as well be the president or the pope or something. But it was like, whoa. So he came. So anyway, so this is you get the idea. But one thing I'd like to stress is it's hard to imagine the energy and excitement at the National Guard Armory when a movie would come, because if it only came once a year and there was, you know, like I keep saying, there was no internet or people weren't in their own little world, everyone got together. And if you missed it, excuse me, it was a big deal. You just don't miss it. And as soon as the lights went out, it was electric, screaming, and it was a really neat deal. And to see that on the big screen, our local Pensacola surfing in good ways, that was a big deal. So anyway, I'm just going to throw this out there before we start the interview. My wife has, what do you call it, chat, GBT? What's it called, CPT? And I asked my wife to ask it to do a surf history of Pensacola Beach. And they got a lot of it amazingly right, and they got a few things off, but I'm going to read it to you real quick. This is surf history according to the internet. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be standing here on the white sands of Pensacola Beach, a place where the rhythm of the waves tells a story older than most people realize. While California and Hawaii often steal the spotlight when it comes to surf culture, here on the Gulf Coast, we've got a rich, passionate, and deeply rooted surf history of our own. And Pensacola Beach is right at its heart. Surfing in Pensacola began gaining traction in the late 1950s and early 60s. As a wave of surf culture spread eastward from California and caught the Gulf breeze, early local surfers crafted their own boards from balsa wood or mail-ordered them from the West Coast. They didn't have wave reports, webcams, or even reliable forecasts, which is true. Just an instinct for swell, which is interesting, this internet knows that, a good eye on the horizon, and an undying love for the sea. Back then, Casino Beach Pier wasn't just a structure, it was the epicenter of the local surf scene. It served as both a landmark and a launch point, attracting pioneering surfers who paddled out into the Gulf Chop, chasing the elusive clean breaks the Gulf offered on the right day. They got that right. These surfers weren't just riding waves, they were building a community. But it goes on, but you get a feel for, there's your version of the internet version. So I'm going to take this off, and Dave, yeah, could you turn this up a little bit?
Oh. Hola, guapito.
No, you're good.
Okay. Now Dave's head's gonna be right.
Okay, welcome to the, no, I'm just kidding. So, what I'm going to do is we're going to show some different pictures and get some comments. But first, I want to ask a couple of questions that have nothing to do with surfing, but they have a lot to do with Pensacola. And I want to ask you guys, what did you pay for the first house you ever bought? And what year was it? And then, Brian, you have a pretty interesting story about that. But so, you guys, if you're comfortable telling me, please do.
Okay, my first house was $17,700.
But where was it?
207 Areola Drive. Across the street from the water. And at the time, I was living there with 2 roommates. The rent was $100 a month. And I went to pay the $100, and the realtor said, how long are you going to live there? And I said, well, I wasn't planning on moving out. Why are you asking? And the realtor said, well, the owner wants to sell the house. And so I said, well, what are the details? And it was $17,700, and you can get an assumable mortgage at 5% for $14,000. And so you need to have $2,500 in order to close. So I went to talk to my dad to get advice. I said, Dad, what should I do? You know, should I move out? Should I buy the house? And my dad said, I'm giving you the down payment. I bought a house, I didn't have to spend $1 of my own.
What year?
That was 1976.
Wow. So, Mike, you've lived on the, was the beach your first house you ever owned?
No, actually, my wife bought the house when I was dating her.
A smart man.
That was okay, but no, we bought the house, you want me to tell them? Yeah. We bought the house in 1978 for $39,500.
And where is your house located?
It's 10, never have to know that part. 109 Ariella, on the beach. It's good. It's,
Wow.
we were very fortunate. All of our kids grew up there. It's been a very great house to have. I would get a great wife, and we love it. We will never move unless we have to. But, you know, how many hurricanes have we been through here? Because we've all gone through. You know, and it's we made it out, and really love the beach.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, you've owned a house or two. And do you know when you bought your first house?
I do. It was, well, I think I do. I bought it in 1982 or 83. You might have to ask Guy Yates out here because I bought it from him.
Oh, wow. And how much do you think it was?
If I remember correctly, it was 62.5, and it was on stilts, which was positive.
Yeah.
These guys bought houses that were concrete block, and so they were a little bit less. But my dad was kind of like Brian's. He didn't give me the down payment, but I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Just pay for it. You know, buy it and move on."
Wow. It's just amazing to look at the prices today and think that you could buy a house for these prices. So this is an obvious question, but just your perspective, your thoughts on how has the area changed since you first came here? And you came here from, well, Hawaii indirectly, right?
My father was in the Coast Guard, so we traveled around, and I came here, strangely enough, by way of Foley, Alabama. That my dad got transferred to New Orleans, and it wasn't anywhere near a beach I could surf. And we were Florida residents. We'd lived in Fort Lauderdale prior, and I had an uncle who lived in Foley, and I convinced my parents to let me go live with my uncle, and I surfed Gulf Shores, and I met Harry Allen, who became my best friend, and Harry and I surfed all over this area, and finally, we were planning on going on a surf trip in the fall after high school, and neither of us got our dream job for the summer, so we didn't really have the money. And I said, "Harry, what are you going to do?" And he goes, "Well, I think I'm going to go to PJC." And I went, "Sounds good to me." And that's how I ended up in Pensacola. Wow. And Pensacola has changed a lot. There used to be virtually nothing on Pensacola Beach. In the wintertime, it was just absolutely paradise for surfers. It was cold, it was windy, and the surf was up, and nobody else was out here to bother us.
Well, you made a comment to me once. You said that the surfers own the beach basically, and especially in the wintertime, because nobody wanted to be out there.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's interesting. So, okay, so before we go to the other guys, so you had lived in Hawaii, you stayed here, you built the shops, you were a surfing sales rep for a while, before I was. I mean, kind of when there weren't many sales reps out there. And you did the photography, but so why did you stay here in Pensacola Beach, which was the time kind of a podunk town, but you know, in contrast to the whole surfing world?
Honestly, the reason I stayed in Pensacola was because of the people. I really liked the community that was here in Pensacola as far as surfing, and just the general population of Pensacola was really good. And that's why I'm here.
Okay, all right. Well, Brian, so you stayed around. You were super involved in surfing for a long time, and I take it you traveled. You could have been in other places. Why did you stay in Pensacola? And how have you seen it change?
I bought the surf shop from the factory from my dad, and so I owned it, so I had to pay the bills, and you know,
You had to be here.
I had to be here, you know, to make ends meet, so that's why I stayed.
Okay, well, no, from your perspective, how has it changed since I mean, when did you first come to Pensacola?
1962.
Okay, 62. What, now, was that when your parents bought the store from my grandparents?
Yep, 1962.
Okay, all right. So you've seen it change a little bit.
Oh, yeah. It's really built up. The beach is huge. In fact, I hardly ever go out to the beach. It's so crowded and busy. You know, I prefer not to.
Okay.
It's just so busy, so
Okay.
crowded.
So Mike,
Even though Mike lives out there.
well, Mike, any comments about, I mean, you could have gone to other places, and your brother went to Hawaii, and he's still there, right?
Yes, he is. We travel a lot. I mean, when we built boards, Dave was there, Brian was there, I was there. What was kind of nice is his dad allowed us to shut the shop down and go surf for 5 months somewhere, and then come back and open it back up. Now, anybody who has a business knows you can't shut any business down and come back and open it up. So, because of his dad, we were all blessed to be able to work there. We were all blessed to enjoy surfing like we loved it. And I think that was the main thing, you know. His dad, I came back after I started my own business, I came back and went to his dad and said, Mr. Waters, I want to thank you. And he's like, looks at me for what? And for allowing us to go surfing, you know, and then open the shop. Well, just like I told you, and he goes, okay. That's all he said. But it was a very fortunate time, very blessed time for us because we were allowed to work as hard as we did. We did work hard. We were also allowed to travel a lot and surf a lot. We've traveled a lot. We've all been on surf trips to Mexico, numerous places. Puerto Rico twice. And Ecuador, Panama, Peru, Fiji, we call it. So, you know, we were all blessed because of his dad. And then we were all blessed, but we all worked hard too. It wasn't like we just surfed all the time and didn't do anything. We were very blessed to have the ability and the fortunate area to work in. And like Dave said, the people here are incredible. I mean, they are really incredible. My brother and I went to Hawaii in 1984. Brian decided to go into boats. I went into windsurfing and went over there at that time. I brought the family back. We decided we were going to stay for a while. We stayed for 3 years, came back. We came back, I started my business here, but the reason we came back is I was married, we had children, and it was time to really get serious. So that's why we came back. But I'll tell you what, raising a family here in this area, where we all live at, all you guys live here too, raising a family here is the best place to raise a family, as far as I'm concerned. All the kids grew up here. So let's talk a little bit of the background. These guys, we've got a ton of stories. I don't know if you want to hear them all, but we've got some.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we'll get to them. I love what you just said about this area. Well, let's go through a few pictures. Okay. This is where it all started, sort of. My grandparents were living in upper state New York, and my uncle was a Marine pilot, I guess in training at NAS. And so my grandparents opened up this store. I think they had a delicatessen up in New York, but they opened this store, and if your folks bought it in 1962, they must have done it in the late 50s or something. But this was, if you're familiar with Hutson Surf Shop, which is what now, D&W?
D&W Hardware.
Okay, so this is across the street from that, closer to Mobile Highway. And so the Waters family bought it for my grandparents, and they moved it across the street and down and made it much bigger. I don't know how big that was, because I don't remember. But anyway, so that's kind of where it started. This is where it went. There's Brian's parents out in front of the store. On New Warrington Road. And my grandparents lived the house next door, and when we first moved down, I was a little kid in Indiana. And I told this last time, but my dad, he worked for a company called Mutual of Omaha, and he had the opportunity to either go work at their main office in Omaha, Nebraska, or come down here and work with my grandfather. And I'm so glad he came down here. So anyway, so we lived in the house next door, and I think we lived with him for probably about a year in a two bedroom, 1 bath house. And my parents took a Sunday afternoon drive across this big bridge, and they came to this little place called Gulf Breeze in 1960 or so. And they just fell in love with it. So they bought a house, I told last year, for $12,000 on Gilmore Drive. Okay, this is Brian. I think you took this picture, Dave. Okay, so any thoughts on that? Are you trying to do an ad, I guess, or?
Oh, actually, I think we did use it for an ad.
Yeah, that was something for an ad.
Okay.
So I could make some money and get a haircut.
And a real job.
So this must have been around 1972 or 3, maybe? Oh, 71, okay. All right.
I think so.
Yeah, the girl on the label, that would be one of the original boards.
Oh, so tell me about that label. Is it
I think I copied that from a soap commercial.
a soap commercial? Okay, all right, okay. Well, so you shaped every single islander, is that accurate?
No.
No.
There are a lot of people that work there as shapers.
Oh, that's a whole nother question about some of the guys.
Yeah,
that
there were
came
probably
through
about a
here.
dozen people that shaped boards. total.
Okay. So Mike, what did you do? It sounds like you're kind of the jack of all trades.
I did everything that anybody never asked about. So, did you glass? No, I didn't glass. Did you shape? No, I didn't shape. What else is there? So I did all these other jobs on board, which needed to be done. They paid better too for the amount of time working. But in general, I did all these other things. I did airbrush a bunch. I tried polishing for a little while. That didn't work, so we got out of that one. Dave polished for a little while too. Yeah, and that's a miserable job, so we got out of
I
that.
polished about 3 boards.
Yeah. But no, I did a bunch of extra work on the job, on the boards, and it was all part of the system. But I think when he shaped boards, he was a really, really good shaper. I mean, I got every board from him, and it was fun learning about all the, I guess, bottom designs, fin designs, everything else that came around. It was all seat of the pants designing, wasn't it, Brian? Yeah. So, but that's just part of it.
How many boards do you think went through the factory over the years?
I would say about 5,000. I think about 5,000, I'm guessing.
Wow. Okay, all right, well, let's keep going. This guy sitting next to me, that's him in 1975.
Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico, yep. Okay, so this is the camera that he had in that picture, and Dave was getting photos in Surfer Magazine and Surfing, and that may not sound like much right now, but back then it was huge. It was our whole, in our little worlds, it was our main thing. I mean, we would memorize the captions on those magazines and read them word for word. But this is Dave working on his trade. Okay, here's a little love fest. This is these 3 guys back, like.
That was our trip to Puerto Rico in 1973. No, 73? 73.
So 52 years ago.
And the interesting thing about that shot is, that was the last frame on the roll of film before we went home.
Oh.
So it was like, okay, let's take one picture just to use up this last frame of film.
Wow, so you guys have been friends for a long time. Okay, and then this one was, the top one was taking just like last couple of years?
2 years ago?
Maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, all right, okay. Oh, this is Mike, behind the surfboard factory, right?
Yeah, right next to it, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Groovy boy.
And check the sock down.
This is when Mike played pro basketball. This is Mike standing. This is when I think he's living in Puerto Rico and couldn't afford much food. 'Cause and then at the top is Dave next to me, and then Brian is the guy with the surfboard. All at different times.
The picture of me was taken by Mark Fu. He grabbed my camera and started messing around and snapped that photo.
Now, for those of you that don't know, Mark Fu became one of the most famous big wave surfers in the world. And he went to school at Gulf Breeze High School for, I think, 1.5 years back in like 73-ish. And in 74, I think he moved to Hawaii. And unfortunately, he passed away surfing in 1993 or 4 or 5. It was just a few days before Christmas, and he I think they surfed a big swell in Hawaii, and they flew the midnight flight to a place called Mavericks in Central California. And so, and he really wanted to become a famous surfer, and he did. But when he died, like, I think he was featured on the New York Times. I think Paul Harvey, if you remember him, he mentioned him. I think there was one of the documentaries on TV, one of the shows had featured his story, like not 60 Minutes, but one of those type shows. So anyway, Mark, it was a pretty big deal. Okay, Brian, this is Steve Forstall, and he thinks he's riding one of your personal boards that he got from you.
Yeah, and you know, he did some shaping too at the shop, so he was one of the shapers.
Okay, so Steve Forstall went to your place. Ron Roush?
Yep, Ron Roush shape boards.
So did you basically train him on how to make boards? Okay. Did Rick Bullock go through your place?
Yeah, Rick Bullock started there too.
Okay. Now I know Rick Saddlemeyer, he did like a lot of airbrushing, right?
He was a gifted artist.
Okay, hopefully, I threw a million pictures up here. I don't know if I'll have enough time to show them all, but I have some in here. He was a great surfer. And he actually, he moved to Hawaii and passed away 10 or 15 years ago. I think he had some heart issues. So, but he was a really good guy. Okay. Okay, I just had to throw this in. This is on one of Brian's boards. This is John Green. This is in the mid-70s, and he was on the 100 block of Areola, paddled out, and his brother Dan paddled out with a water housing of some sort and took this picture. But that's on one of Brian's boards. And this is John Green in 1979 on one of Brian's boards. This is the day, this is at Fort Pickens, the day that Hurricane Frederick was barreling towards us, and kind of changed our place forever. It changed surfing forever because the point and the bay, they call the bay where the waves wrap around into the bay, the sandbars have never been the same. But anyway, so he's on one of Brian's boards there. Well, John sent me a few pictures just before this. So this is him. This is a brand new board he got from you, Brian. He hadn't ridden it yet. He's about to jump off the pier. And what I love about this picture is he's about to jump off the pier. If you look closely on the right side of the screen, you can see how the railing is bent, and there's just no development on the beach. And so this would be like 76-ish, somewhere in there. So. And also the fact that it's the winter time, they would close the pier, but it was open. Nobody really cared. You could go out there. You could, they would shut the gate and chain it sometimes, but everyone would climb around it, climb over it, bend the gate. So a lot of times they just leave it wide open, just go. And then you could jump off the pier. There's no insurance issues. Nobody cared. And it was a special time. It really was. Okay, I think it's the last one of John on his Islander on a really good Pensacola day. And this is your brother Steve Bredesen right here, the guy closest to us looking at him. Yeah. Yeah. It looks like it was a good day. Okay. Anything to say about this, Brian? This is right behind your shop.
Yeah, look at all the leftover resin thrown up on the wall there.
It's a mess. Look at all the resin containers, and so I'm assuming this is probably around the 1970-ish. Okay, so you weren't the first guy that your dad bought the store from my grandparents, but your dad wasn't a surfer. So how did surfing enter into Hutson Hardware?
Well, you know, it was Hutson Hardware and Sporting Goods. So in those days, there were only two places that sold sporting goods in Pensacola. So people would go to the Yellow Pages, call up Hudson's Hardware and Sporting Goods and say, do you have any surfboards? And my dad said, no, but I'll order you one. And that's how we got into the surfboard business. People coming wanting surfboards.
I had no idea. Well, how did you guys start to make surfboards?
Well, my dad got connected with some people. I was 13 years old and pretty young. And Mike McIntyre was one of them. There were some other local surfers.
And now Mike was in the Navy, transferred from Southern California, right?
Right.
And was Ed Willett, was he the same?
Ed Willett was there. there were about four people. I can't remember everybody's names because so old, but somehow my dad got with these guys, and the new building for the hardware store had a building in back, and they made it into a surfboard factory. Something my dad did, he financed it.
So how long were surfboards made? I remember there was like Unit 4.
Right.
There
That
was
was a Mike McIntyre idea.
Okay,
I
wasn't
think-
there Hutson surfboards
Yeah,
too?
Hudson Surfboards, and I changed it to Islander when I bought the place for my dad.
And now what year was that?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember. It was, I was 20 years old, so. 72, right?
5 years.
72.
Okay, so how did you learn how to shape?
I just watched people shape in the shop there, and then, develop my own ideas about it.
Wow.
So, I just taught myself really basically.
Wow. And and that's something to hear that you might not think much of it because now you can go to YouTube and learn everything.
Right.
But back then, we were so small in the surfing world, and there weren't a lot of people to look up to help you, there wasn't a wealth of talent.
And I did something kind of interesting. I made a template for every size board that we made, and I clamped the template on the blanks, and I used a router to cut the outline. So the outline of the boards were perfect because the router, and I would flip the template over, do one side, and flip it over and clamp it on there, and then route the surfboard outlet, the outline of the board with a router against the template. So it was almost like a real crude, machine type cutting mechanism versus most people would use like a saber saw or something so that the cuts would not be as accurate.
Well, so then how did Mike get involved with?
I don't even remember, that was so long ago.
So I think it was a prerequisite that you had to work at the Hudson Hardware before you got involved in the surf shop. So I think I met Brian because I got back from California, and we were all surfing, and plus we went to high school together. And so you had to wait for an opening and some job at the shop. And so the first opening was to make fins, and I'm like, I'll do it. So that's how I started. And that's kind of how I got involved in it. And I slowly but surely do another job. But I made fins for quite a while. But in those days, we did all piecework. So, something would pay you $1.50 to do it. Some would pay you $2.50 to do it. It wasn't a lot of money. But if you got good at it, you could do a lot and work hard, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So, but that's how I started anyways.
So Dave, how did you meet these guys? How did you get involved with their whole program? Because you sold their boards at your store.
Right. When I lived in Foley, Alabama, Brian and a couple of his friends, Mike Bruton, and I don't remember who, had a little bitty shop in Gulf Shores, Hudson's Hardware #2 or something like that. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so it was the only place in that area that you could go get a board or get wax or anything like that. And so I sort of became friends with them because of that particular little store. And then Harry and I, being the wanderers that we were, would go drive all the way over to the main Hudson's Hardware, and we just were friendly, we talked to everybody, talked to Brian, and then when I moved to Pensacola, I hung around so much that Brian finally put me to work to just make me shut up and asking questions. And I started polishing boards before you came out and started making fins and stuff. Because actually, I believe I was making the fins, and I was really bad at it. So Brian was glad to get Mike out there to make fins for him. And but it's just a natural progression. You just meet people and do the best you can to be friendly and stuff like that.
And that was like
these guys
50
just
years
took
ago.
me in.
So like 50 years ago, you were getting to know these guys.
Yeah, 1970 and 71. So.
Well, we have to acknowledge someone that's here, and Tom Groh is here, and he worked in the surf shop.
Okay, Tom, stand up. Where are you? Oh, hey, Tom.
Tom, would you be embarrassed to stand up?
There he is.
I have an image that Tom gave me, and if I'm not mistaken, he thinks it was probably the first surfboard ever made in Pensacola. And I think you're standing by that Porsche?
Yeah.
That bathtub Porsche thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So Tom and Scott Bush were super instrumental back then. Wow, well, let's keep going. This is just behind the surf shop, so behind the surfboard factory. And I think this is Ed Ouellette's. Ed was a guy, I think, was he in the military and he was transferred here? Okay, okay. Okay, well, he was one of the guys, this would be back in the 60s.
Look at the fin on.
Yeah, look at that fin. This is Scott Bush with a cigarette, working on shaping a board back in the factory many years ago. And this is outside, and this is Ed Ouellette in 1967. So were you watching him, taking notes? Yeah. Okay, all right.
When my dad would let me.
Okay. This is an interesting story. This is, well, Brian and Dave took this picture, correct?
Yeah, Dave took the picture.
Well, now, this picture was in
An ad.
an ad, but the actual paper picture was in your house, I think, and a hurricane came, and Steve Forstall found this picture in the sand dunes.
No way.
And Steve, who learned to shape from Brian, ended up with he made surfboards down in Central Florida for years. He had this picture up on his wall. That's why you have the folds in it. But it had been through Hurricane Frederick, maybe?
I think it was Frederick.
Okay. Ended up on a sand dune, ended up in a surf factory down there. So it's lasted a lot, but it's been through a lot.
Another note to do.
So anyway, so this, what year was this probably? 70?
Well, I couldn't say. 74.
Well, you've got the twin fin, so.
You dated because he got a haircut.
I made enough money to get a haircut.
Okay. All right. This is an ad, and this was in, was this in Surfer Magazine, or was this in like one of the local?
I don't know where it was put.
It was either Surfer or Surfy.
Okay. And this is Mike Bredesen up at the top in Puerto Rico, and the bottom is Brian in Puerto Rico. And you see Joe Buck Surf Shop listed. So there's a guy named Jerry Blank that used to ride for Yancey in Interlight Surf Shop. And in the summer of '74, he lived in Pacific Beach, California. And I went out there too, and we lived together. But there was a surf shop called San Diego Surf Shop, and a lady named Barb Dybel owned it. And for somehow Jerry got to know the people there, and he just thought, I'm going to start my own a surf shop. So he came back here after that summer, started Joe Buck Surf Shop, and Joe Buck was from the Midnight Cowboy, is that right? And he had foosball tables, and he had just stuff, and it was, everyone hung out there. But I don't think Jerry was quite the businessman. I don't think he...
Jerry and I were roommates the year he started the surf shop, and he came home one day in the late fall, early winter, and he goes, "Dave, I can't take it anymore. I can't sit in the shop and wait all the time, and for customers." And I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And he said, "I'm either going to sell it or I'm going to close it down." And I said, "Well, what do you sell it for?" And he said, "The cost of my inventory." And I said, "Let's go count it." And about 3 weeks later, I was the proud owner of Joe Buck Surf Shop, which I later changed the name to Buck Surf and Sport. And Jerry went on to great success, and Bucks for a number of years had great success. And so it worked out good for both of us, I believe.
There's a side story to this, and if you've been married for any length of time, you've had fights with your spouse. But one of the wonderful things about marriage is that in the years later, it's just nice to look back and realize that you and your spouse have made it through the ups and downs, and it kind of makes it more special. Well, Dave and I were friends, and Dave took me to Puerto Rico one year, and he even did an ad in Surfer magazine, and I was in it. And but there was a kind of a rift in our friendship at one time, and I was young, and I was a sales rep for a company called Gordon Smith, and I just dreamed of having my own surf shop. And I used to be, when I was at PJC, I would be burnt out from studying. I lived about a mile away from Dave's store, and I would get on my bike and ride up there, and I'd stare in the window and just imagine having my own shop. Well, I can remember when I worked for Gordon Smith, I thought, I'm going to start a surf shop in Gulf Breeze with Gordon Smith boards, which Dave was the dealer. And so I remember I was up in New Jersey on a sales trip, and I got the courage to call Dave. I said, Dave, I'm going to start a surf shop in Gulf Breeze. And he got quiet. And so it wasn't the best time in our friendship. But the point about marriage is now, that was probably, I don't know, 40 years ago. And it's just really neat. We had our ups and we had our downs. I ended up selling Dave that shop. 7 months later, I wasn't very good at staying in the shop. So Dave bought that. It was called Sugar Bear Surf Center. It's where Harbor Town is now. And it was where Interlight started, a little 10 by 10 building. And Yancey had that shop, and his rent was $50 a month. And when I took it over, I didn't realize it, but my rent was $150 a month. When I found out what Yancey was paying, I was so bummed. Well, Dave bought the shop for me, and his brother Mark, who's here somewhere, I know he worked in the shop quite a bit back here. And all of a sudden, Harbor Walk was coming in, and Dave had to leave, and they tore it down. And I remember Dave called me or came up to me and goes, did you know about that? That they were going to tear it down? I said, no, I didn't, I'm sorry. But anyway, it's nice to have, after 50, 60 years, it's special to have friendships when you've been through your ups and downs. So Dave, sorry. Oh, but one point that Dave made me feel really good about buying the shop is he told me one time, he goes, you know what? Something really good came out of that shop. And I go, what? And when I had it, it was a little teeny place, and I don't know how I did it, but I had the Vans shoe. I had Vans shoes in there, which Vans became really big back then.
You were exclusive for Pensacola.
And I don't even know where I could keep inventory. But when Dave bought it, Vans became very hot, and he made a lot of money off those Vans. So I felt really good about that.
Fast Time from Ridgemont High came out, and of course this scene with Spicoli where he hits himself in the head with the checkerboard Vans shoes. Checkerboard shoes just went totally viral, and I ended up buying Vans by the tractor trailer load, and I would have a list of people that wanted and told me they wanted a certain size, certain color, whatever, and we just get on the phone and start calling. And so I sold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Vans shoes, all from just bailing Tom out from a bad business venture.
And he also bought it for the cost of inventory. So
I'm good at that.
So look in front of your chair. If there's a chair that has a little sticker that says big yellow dot on it, tap that person and ask them to stand up. There should be 4 of them out there. So if you have a big yellow dot on the back of your chair, please stand.
Oh, let's get pictures.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I've got some hats. So if you have a big yellow dot, see me afterwards. You get a free hat. It's for $30. So okay, I have some men's and women's. Okay, let's keep going here.
Where they went.
Okay, this is Dave in front of Bucks, and do you know, for you, those of you that don't know where Bucks was, it's right at the main stoplight at Fairpoint and 98, where now you have the mattress store and the Dunkin'
The
Donuts.
Benson building.
It was the Benson building, and so Dave was in there. And you know, Dave, you told me a story once that when you expanded your shop, you knocked out the wall, and it's where the post office used to be. And you found some letters from, was it back in the 40s or something, or from years ago?
We found some letters that obviously had slipped through out of the mailboxes or whatever. I think the lock boxes were there, and they just had never been delivered. So we took them to the post office and dropped them in the mail. I don't know who may have gotten a letter that was maybe at that point in time, possibly 20 or 30 years old.
Dear John.
Well, the Bensons made the first post office in Gulf Breeze.
Yes, Mr. Benson was the first postmaster of Gulf Breeze. And when he got appointed to be the postmaster, that Gulf Breeze didn't have a name, and they had to name the post office as per post office regulations. And they said, what is the name of your town where your post office is? And he goes, thought about it for a while, and he finally said, you know, we're very near the Gulf, we have nice breezes, we should call it Gulf Breeze. And so Mr. Benson unilaterally chose the name of Gulf Breeze.
Yay. And then
That's
he
a great story.
And then Mrs. Benson ran it when he was the postmaster in the Philippines in the war. In World War
Yes, ma'am.
II. She ran it.
And Mr. Benson, or both of the Bensons, but Mr. Benson was the forward-facing person in the family. They were both very active in the Democratic Party back when the South was nothing but Democrats. You know, what did they call it? The Dixiecrats. And I was over at their house one day, which I believe now the Historical Society owns the house. But I think they wanted to pay the rent, and they started talking, and they loved to talk to me about things. And Mrs. Benson pulled out a picture and showed me, and she said, this is us at JFK's inauguration. And I looked at there's Mr. and Mrs. Benson very close to John F. Kennedy as he's being sworn in to be, I mean, he was seriously powerful in this area, and no one knows it. He was unsung hero.
You can know it now.
And they were the nicest people that I've ever met.
You know, we had a house next door to the Mr. and Mrs. Coe, and Mr. Coe was, well, Brian would know better here, but wasn't Mr. Coe one of the original owners of Pensacola Hardware? Brian Nobles, where are you? Oh, okay. Well, the Coes lived next door, and Mrs. Coe, who was older, she's since passed on, but she told me stories about how when she was a little girl, after World War II, there wasn't much in Gulf Breeze, and they had a summer house on the bay in Gulf Breeze proper that faced Pensacola, you know, it was on the north side of Gulf Breeze. And kind of across from where the Baptist church is on Fairpoint Drive. And so they would go hang out up there at Benson Building, and there'd be a radio, and they'd listen to news, they'd buy Coca-Colas and stuff. But she told me, if you don't know, there's a private cemetery in Gulf Breeze proper, right off of Fairpoint, and it's kind of all overgrown now and fenced in. But she told me that they'd be out in the yard as little girls, and they'd have the radio on, and a boat would come across the bay, and her mom would make them turn off the radio, and they'd have a casket in the boat. And they'd come from Pensacola, they'd walk up the little dune, they'd bury their dead in this little cemetery. And that was probably, I don't know, if it was after the war, maybe in the late 40s or early 50s, I suppose.
And it's still there.
Okay, this picture, this is actually me down here in the green, and this is getting Jimmy Mitchell in the brown jacket. And there was a restaurant called Tokyo Chaya on Chase Street years ago, and one of the young guys that worked there, he was Japanese, and he would come hang around the surf shop sometimes. I worked for Dave for a while, and so he told us how you say, "Let's go surfing." It's Nami Nori ni Iko, and so Dave put it on the sign, and we took the picture. And that was probably around 1975-ish. Wait a minute, no, that was probably, I worked for you like in
I'm not sure you were actually working.
oh, well, maybe not, but I think, was it 79 or 80 maybe? Okay, maybe 1980. Okay, this is Dave in Mexico, and did Brian take this picture?
I don't recall.
He did. The deal was Brian went surfing the day before, and it was real small, but he stayed out a long time, got really sunburned. And so we pulled, this swell hit that night, and we pulled Paul Hetherington's van up to the beach sideways and opened the side doors, and because Brian didn't want to get in the sun anymore, and I set my camera up inside Paul Hetherington's van, his blue Dodge van, and Brian snapped pictures of all of us surfing while he suffered through his sunburn.
Well, now, this picture you had on one of your shirts, you sold millions of those shirts at Bucks. That was kind of their official logo.
Don't say that, Brian will want a royalty.
Well, I can see you're on one of his boards and see the Islander across it, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
All right. Okay. This is Rick Sievers. This was in an ad for Bucks, and you can see some of the team guys: Jerry Blank, Rick Settlemeyer, Rick Sievers, John Green, Randall King, Tom Frudiker, Carol Snodgrass, and Steve Hensley. Were they actually on your team, or were they just like people that from this area that had standings in the ESA? Do you know?
No, those are all people that were on my surf team.
Okay.
You know, I don't believe Carol stayed on the team for very long, but she was on there. And let's see. Well, John Green and Randall King, they were on my surf team for years. Tom Frudiker also. Tom worked in the store.
And Tommy's here, his son, somewhere. Oh, back here. Yep. Okay. Okay, these are some pictures that Dave took. This was in just a local little magazine. It was actually a flyer for a surf contest, but you've got Interlight Surf Shop and Scott's Surf Shop, which was Scott Bush's shop. That's Mark Fu on the bottom, the guy that I told you who lived here, became famous big wave rider, and died surfing. And Mark had a famous statement. He said, to get the ultimate thrill, you have to be willing to pay the ultimate price. And he did. And that's Yancey Spencer above, and I don't know if this makes sense if you don't surf, but it's called switchfoot. He typically would go right on going front side, he switchfoot. Anyway, so some more photos Dave took. This is what the flyer that was in for this contest we had here. Back in that time, that's Mark Fu on the cover. We had a Southern Surfing Association. The East Coast, the whole East Coast was the ESA, the Eastern Surfing Association. And I think at the same time, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was somewhere in there a Gulf Surfing Association. But for the guys here to be able to go surf and not have to go compete against all the East Coast guys, we made our own division. And so then the guys from here went to the U.S. Championship in 1974 up in Cape Hatteras.
Yeah, the Gulf Coast Surfing Association, or the Gulf Surfing Association, was Texas. And they never wanted to expand over this direction, so we just decided to form like the Panhandle Surfing Association, but to make it better sounding, became the Southern Surfing Association.
Okay, and so we had our own flyer for the contest, and the Galatea Inn was a sponsor, and the Galatea Inn is kind of near Margaritaville, or now it's Pensacola Beach Resort. We're in that same location, and Shakey's Pizza, which was in town. This is Yancey. Look at this. Put yourself in a mural with Dave's photos. Did you ever sell many murals through that, or?
I don't think I sold a single one.
Okay.
It has probably Steve's phone number.
An Islander ad that I think the artwork was done by Steve Glover. Yeah, Steve Glover did the artwork for this, and that was pretty characteristic of the time. Here's Brian again with that from that same picture that we had, where it was creased. This is a picture Dave took. I think this is Panama City.
That's correct.
Okay, and this is Yancey with AGP Surfboards, and that's a company that he and Hank Warner had, and that was a pretty big deal around here. There's a couple of these surfboards you see here on the wall, and Brian was totally surprised when his daughter-in-law and husband came and brought these boards, at least these two. Did he bring all three of those?
No, I brought
Oh, you brought okay, all right. So,
Let me say something.
yes,
All right, so in those days, when we built boards, a lot of people would do the pin lines using gel coat only, which is really good. You have to tape off, you have to pull it at the right time. It's really a true art form.
what's the pin line?
Okay, what's pin line? Pin line is that black line around the edge there. See, you have the bottom, you see the mural in the middle, and right where the mural stops, there's a pin line there. Well, in those days, we didn't do it on foam, we did it all on the glass. And so you'd have to mix your resin. It was really a art form that is totally gone now in surfboard building. Nobody does that anymore. But Brian was really good at the red, white, and blue, super tiny pin lines. And they were really, really hard to do, but he was really good at it. He had flary chin. Rick Bullock was good at it also. So that's just one of those things that people don't know about, but the art form there is a long lost art that nobody does anymore.
That's interesting.
Bring it back,
Okay, here, we're gonna go all over the place with pictures here, but they're all, mostly all tied in with either Brian, Mike, or Dave. This is a guy named Noah Whitman, and he says that Dave took this picture, but you don't remember taking that picture. So anyway, Noah, he's a local guy. I think he lives out near Pace somewhere now, and he had his own shop for a while in Pensacola. He was a young Gulf Breeze guy. He grew up. This is the guy that Dave mentioned was his best friend, Harry Allen. And Harry was a great guy. Dave took that